and find the.
I got you, Reshma.
There we go. Oh, great. Oh, it's already being recorded. Okay, so you should have gotten a consent asking for your consent earlier. I didn't see the notification. Thank you again, everybody, as we worked out some of the technical glitches that I'm sure all of us are experiencing and have gotten used to over the past year. Thank you all for introducing yourself. My name is Reshma. Welcome to Unit 3, focusing on the assessment system. This session is geared for grade 2 teachers new to Amplify, meaning this is your first year teaching Amplify, but based on the introductions, it seems like we have a range of experience in the room, which is fine. We welcome everybody and do want to let you know that I'll try my best to cater to the needs of everybody in this room, but in case there's something you need further support in, if you're a first year teacher, you feel like we went through something too quickly, or if you need a more in-depth understanding of something, do know that we have open office hours after each of these sessions starting at 4 p.m. So do feel free to stick around then. We welcome you for any questions, either related or unrelated to today's topic about Amplify Science. So for those of you I have not met, I have met some of you in previous remote sessions. Welcome back. My name is Reshma. Glad to be with you here today. I've been with Amplify the past couple of years, really supporting educators and administrators like yourself in implementing this program. And I'm looking forward to doing the same for you today, but this time for Unit 2, second grade, through the lens of the Amplify assessment system and geared towards new teachers. Just some norms just to make this session as productive as possible. If you can take some time, if you have not been on Zoom, to orient yourself to the platform, please do find the chat, as we will be using that frequently. Thank you all for muting yourselves. That just reduces background noise. But again, I do love to hear voices other than myself. So when you're speaking, please do unmute yourself. If you like to have a note catcher present, feel free to set that up. And most importantly, engage at your comfort level. We are here to support you, certainly here to answer your questions, but by no means am I the expert in this room. The expertise is in here, and we want to make sure we leverage that here from you so we can learn from each other in terms of what has been working this year during a remote hybrid instructional context. So please do also answer questions as well. We have much to learn from each other. You might have already done this, but you might want to set up 2 windows for today's webinar, or you might just be comfortable navigating between tabs like I am right now, whichever floats your boat. If you've been in my previous sessions, you'll know that I will demonstrate something and then give you a chance to practice and or reflect. So there's no need to really work on 2 windows simultaneously, but if you like to do that, I'll give you just a few moments to set that up if you wanted to. And take care of any other housekeeping tasks that you have not already. Sign into the attendance sheet and go ahead and open up the Amplify Science account in a separate window or separate tab. And I see other folks have joined. Welcome. So I'll give you a few moments to go ahead and do that.
I'm going on to Amplify. How do I find the attendance and the other window?
So the other window is optional. If you split screen, you can go ahead and do that. If you don't do that, you'll be fine navigating in between tabs. It's completely optional. The attendance sheet last I saw was in the chat. Let me check. I believe it was. If your chat was disabled, perhaps you didn't see it, but it's in there right now.
Okay.
Go to the chat for that.
Okay.
Okay. So this is a 1-hour workshop, and by the end of this workshop, we hope to accomplish 3 goals. Make sure you're able to utilize the unit resources to really understand what the learning goals for this particular unit is. We want to be able to apply the resources related to formative assessment in this unit so you can really use that to analyze your student progress and really see how your kiddos are working towards their progress towards these learning goals. And we also want to introduce or refresh your memory of the various embedded differentiation strategies and supports that we have throughout the Amplify Science units. We hope to do that through this agenda today. We already began with our welcome and introductions, and we're going to start off with a short anticipatory activity. So folks, if you don't mind just meeting me virtually at this Jamboard, I'm about to drop the link into the chat. Let's see if the chat is working for everybody now. I'm just going to go ahead and drop this link. It's a Jamboard link. It's in your chat now. And I'll go ahead and meet you there. You'll find a prompt there, two prompts actually. So the first prompt is your definition of formative assessment and strategies you've used so far to formatively assess your students remotely. Oops. So for those of you who have not used the Jamboard before, just to let you know, it's pretty much a whiteboard. You can either post using a sticky and change the colors, type your response, and then it goes on the whiteboard. Or I'll go ahead and erase that. The other option is use a text box, type, and it goes on. Please note that there's 2 pages. I'll give folks a few minutes to gather their thoughts and post their responses. We'll give folks another minute to gather their ideas and post their responses. So I'm going to go ahead and voice the responses that I see here. I see definition, a way to drive instruction from the data. Yeah, a key word, data. Exit tickets after a lesson. Sure, exit tickets are a form of formative assessment. A formative assessment is an ongoing assessment where teachers gain knowledge of a student's understanding of a topic. It could be done by exit tickets, direct questioning, writing samples, and other. Yes, another key word, an ongoing assessment. A formative assessment is a type of quantitative type of assessment, another key word, quantitative. Uh, Formative assessment is used for assessing students' learning, for example, to identify strengths in learning and make modifications. Modifications, another key word with formative assessments. And then I'm starting to see some ways you all have been assessing formatively in a remote learning environment. I see Google Slides with questions matching fill in the blanks for sure. And I'll be doing that today as well and during our PD. I've been using Google Forms and independent work for sure. I like Google Forms particularly because it sends you a spreadsheet and it's a great way to assess the data that you collect. And then I also see here small groups, self-recording while reading for F and PS. I'm missing what the F and PS means, but yes, for sure, self-recording is a way to allow students to offer their responses in a different format, because we do, for formative assessment, want to offer alternate response options, especially during this remote hybrid instructional time. Thank you all for activating your background knowledge, letting me know what you know and what you've been doing so far. We'll certainly keep that in mind as we progress throughout today's session. But as you all said, formative assessment is basically a cycle of gathering, interpreting, and then taking action on whatever data you gather about what kiddos are learning. Some ways to formatively assess remotely, you all have already mentioned, but there's Pear Deck. There's various aspects of the G Suite. Folks have mentioned in the Jamboard, you're using Google Slides. For students to enter their responses, you're using Google Forms. So it seems like folks are already doing that. Flipgrid, somebody mentioned audio response. I know that's a popular tool. Perhaps you're using some features of Microsoft Teams. And I've also heard from other sessions that folks are also using features of Nearpod to formatively assess. Before we move on further, I just want to see if there's any questions today, and also let you know that throughout today's session, there are dedicated moments for questions, just because I'm not always able to respond to the chat right away when facilitating. So this is my chance to just look at the chat to see if I missed anything, and also a chance for you to unmute yourself or drop into the chat any questions, comments, or thoughts that you have. But at any point during the session, if there's something that's pressing, and of course, please feel free just to come off of mute. I always love to hear another voice. I'm checking the chat now to see if I missed anything. Good. All right, looking good for now. So we're gonna go ahead and begin by unpacking the progress build for this unit. And as you'll begin to know or refresh your memory of, the progress build is Amplify Science's learning progression for each unit. But before we look further at the learning progression, the first step in getting to know a unit is knowing what's the problem here? What problem are students solving? And what phenomena is it related to? So this is Changing Landforms, the third unit of second grade. And in this particular unit, students take on the role of geologists, and they need to figure out why the edge of the ocean cliff is closer to the flagpole than it used to be. So basically, the director of this fictional oceanside recreation center got a scare when a nearby cliff collapsed. And he's worried that erosion on his recreation center might be a safety hazard for his visitors. So the students, your second graders, are taking on the role of geologists, and they're going to investigate landforms, erosion, and in the process be able to advise the director on whether it's safe to keep the center open, even though a nearby cliff and its own cliff is changing. So whenever you start a unit, if you've taught Amplify before, I know some of you here have been, this is your third year, then I heard some are first year, you know the first step you do is kind of figure out what's the student role, what's the problem and phenomena that they'll be grappling with. And a reminder, Since this is a session geared towards new teachers, I am going to, perhaps as you've seen this for the first time, or refresh your memory of the easiest place to find the phenomena. So when I go to the unit landing page, when you go into the unit, what I had excerpted on my slide is from the unit map. This is really the quickest place to get a quick summary of what the problem, phenomena, and student role is. And that's what you just saw on my slide, the unit map. So over the course of 22 lessons, how are our students going to help the director figure out if he wants to keep his recreation center open? So what happens over the 22 lessons? So in order for the lessons to be coherent and build on each other, we have something called progress build, and that's basically our learning progression. And not only does it inform the coherent sequencing of our lessons, so we make sure ideas coherently and sensibly build on each other, but it also anchors our assessment system, which is our focus for today. Here's our assessment system. So our assessment system has summative and formative assessments. These gray bars are the summative assessments. This one, excuse me, is the summative assessment, the end of unit assessment, and then we have our pre-unit assessment. And then today's focus will be on formative assessment, because as you know from teaching Amplify, the focus really is on formative assessment. And in Amplify Science, we just use these symbols to represent the formative assessments, these orange hummingbirds. And today we'll be taking a closer look at what does a formative assessment look and feel like, and what can you do to take action? How can you collect data, and how can you respond to that data in a way that's actionable? And as you'll notice, the formative assessments, unlike the other assessments, are sprinkled throughout the unit. They occur typically in almost every or every other lesson. Some other features of the formative assessments is that they encompass a range of modalities. So students are not only writing, they're not only talking, but they're also reading, writing, visualizing, and you're gathering data while they're engaged in more than one modality. It provides a window into student thinking to really make student thinking visible. And it also assesses the 3 dimensions. So we're not only assessing concepts that they figure out, we're assessing how well are they carrying out the science and engineering practices. How well are they utilizing those big ideas called the cross-cutting concepts? And the fourth feature is, with Amplify Science, the formative assessments happen while instruction is happening. So you don't need to start or stop instruction. So for example, unlike exit tickets, which tend to take place at the end of instruction, our formative assessments happen while you're teaching. So they're embedded within instruction. So those are some key features that are important to keep in mind when it comes to our formative assessments. So where can you find more information about our assessments and how they're 3-dimensional? Again, if you're new to the program, or perhaps you've been teaching, this might be a part of the curriculum you might have overlooked, because we have plenty of resources, and that's why professional learning sessions are always useful, because hopefully you uncover something that you may have overlooked. So let's take a look at the assessment system document right here. I usually like to open it up as a printable PDF. And as that opens up, I'm going to go ahead and show you one part. When you scroll to the middle, and this is really for any unit, you'll start seeing a table here. And this table will tell you how each assessment is 3-dimensional. And that's what I have up here. We're going to be focusing on the first formative assessment of this unit. And if you're wondering, how is this assessment 3-dimensional and where is it? This is a good place to go. So you'll see that in this particular assessment, students are reading and discussing a book called Gary's Sand Journal. And these are the 3 dimensions that it's aligned to. So for example, students are going to ask questions and define the problem, and they're also obtaining, evaluating, communicating information. So you can see that the assessment is also multimodal. But before we look at our assessment system, in order to know what you're assessing, you need to know what the big ideas in the unit are. What are you aiming for students to figure out? And that's our progress build. So if you haven't seen where our progress build is, if you go on our unit landing page, it's the third resource down. If I open it up, Again, I realize that some of you, again, so there's a range of experience in this room, 3 years teaching, 1 year teaching. So maybe you've seen this before. This is a review and maybe you haven't and you feel like I'm going a little bit too fast. Just please feel free to come off of mute and let me know. Or please stick by during our office hours for any additional support that you need. So here's the progress build, and you'll see if you scroll down, these are the 3 levels of the progress build. And the progress build pretty much describes how students' conceptual understanding gets more sophisticated and complex as they move through the unit. And as educators, it's important for us to understand because we need to know what exactly are we assessing. And by knowing where on the progress build we are, we're in a better position to serve our students' needs. By knowing precisely what we're assessing, we can have a better idea of how to adjust our instruction. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a chance to collaboratively in this document, this is a set of slides here that I'm going to drop in, to internalize the ideas of your progress build. And more importantly, really start to understand how is the progress build cumulative. So I went ahead and dropped that into the chat and I'll go ahead and navigate there for you. And we're all going to kind of meet here collaboratively. Looks like this. You'll see that there are fillable spaces. I'll give folks a chance to enter. I'll give folks a chance to enter before I talk further about this. And I see folks are entering. So right here, you'll see that there's different levels of the progress build. Some progress build levels have 4, this particular unit doesn't. So if you can all collaboratively go ahead and choose a progress build level and summarize it in your own words. And then more importantly, think about what new ideas are added in the next level and how do those new ideas build and connect to the level before it. Because as you really begin to internalize the progress build, you'll see that the progress build is cumulative, that ideas that were introduced in a previous level are revisited, refined in a subsequent level. So this is a collaborative working doc, so go ahead and just start typing where you like to. Choose a progress build level. Folks can type at the same time. Perhaps instead of summarizing a progress build level, you're more interested in seeing how they're connected. The intention isn't to finish this activity, it's just to get started because this is a 1-hour session. This is something that you can revisit since it is a collaborative working doc. So I'm just going to get us started by putting in the name of the unit, changing landforms. So I'll give folks about a few minutes to get started on this. And then once we've internalized our progress build, at least to some degree, we can tackle the formative assessment of this unit further. So I'll give folks a few minutes to get started. Give folks another minute. Now I see that folks have started to summarize the levels, and the next step would really be to really start making the connections between the levels. I realize this is a very short amount of time, but given this is a 1-hour session, my intention is to get you started on certain exercises, and hopefully this is something that you'd like to complete on your self-study or collaborative planning time. So with some understanding of the progress build, let's kind of take a look at what a formative assessment looks like and feels like in an Amplify Science lesson briefly. But before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and see if there's any questions that I missed and double check the chat. Okay, seems like we're good to go. So let's go ahead and dive into an exemplar assessment experience. We're going to just go through a brief model activity with an embedded formative assessment. So I'm going to ask you to just put on the caps of students today, and I will be your teacher just for the next very short few minutes. And really the purpose here is to really get a sense of what can a formative assessment really look like and feel like in a remote environment, of course, because we're all remote. So this particular, and this happens to be, folks, the very first formative assessment to take place in this third unit of second grade. This is in the 4th lesson, and it's activity 2. Students are engaging in a partner reading. It's 25 minutes long, but of course this is just a sample, so we're just going to go through it much quicker and not allow for the actual partner reading, but just assume that as students you have read this book in the previous activity. So welcome back, second graders. We are now going to read the book that I introduced you to in the lesson before together today. So you're going to have to pair up with your partners in the breakout rooms that I'm about to assign you in. So remember, we started reading Gary's Sand Journal. What you're going to do right now, what we had started yesterday, is you're going to read the rest of the book with your group in your breakout room. And I'm going to be visiting each of the breakout rooms. But what's important to do is not only to read, but as you read, you're going to create those pictures in your mind to better understand the ideas of the book. Remember, we learned that when we create pictures in our mind, it helps us better understand what the book's talking about. This is called visualizing. So you're going to go ahead and get into your breakout rooms, and I'm going to stop by each of them to listen in on what you all are visualizing. And we're going to come back together here in 15 minutes in the main room. Taking off my teacher hat, let's fast forward. Okay, kiddos, welcome back. So you all visualized, you made those pictures in your head as you were reading to help you better understand what you read. Gary's a scientist. He also visualizes. Everyone turn to page 12 or just look on to my slide, look on your screen, and I'm going to read this out loud. In his sand journal, Gary writes, I observed sands from 3 different beaches. I recorded my observations in a sand journal. I used my observations to figure out what the sand is made of and how old it is. I also figured out where the sand came from and how it got to the beach. I visualized how water broke down different things to make sand and then carried the sand to the beach. So scientists also visualize to help them better understand something that they're trying to figure out, just like we just did. And I all heard you do so nicely. You're also probably making pictures in your head or visualizing at home and in places other than science class. Can some of you share how else you visualize? For example, when I'm hungry, I love to visualize how the food will feel in my mouth. That makes me less hungry when I have to wait. How about you? Okay, thank you all for sharing. So we're going to go ahead and post this vocabulary word on our classroom wall if you are coming into class. If you're not, you'll see it on our virtual wall. So our word is visualize, to make a picture in your mind using information from different places or sources. So there you go. That was a model of what a formative assessment looks like and feels like. Folks, reminder, whenever you see an on the fly. So this is where the formative assessment was happening. So we're going to go ahead and debrief and deconstruct this further. So that formative assessment, the way I conducted it, and of course, folks might have done things differently, is in order to really understand how well students are visualizing, I decided that I'm going to make breakout rooms, but there's other ways you can do this. We can, of course, discuss that shortly. But when you're engaging in administering a formative assessment, you want to know what exactly to look for. So just a reminder, each and every Amplify Science formative assessment has a text box that tells you what exactly to look for. I'm just going to go ahead and remind you where that is. So you go to the particular lesson. In this case, it was chapter 1, lesson 1.4. Let me backtrack. And it was activity 3. Sorry, it was activity 2 rather. And this is where the formative assessment is. And when you click the hummingbird, you get this text box that tells you what to look for or listen for, and then what to do, the now what. And this is what you're going to be seeing on my slides. Just wanted to make sure folks know where that is. So in this particular assessment, here's the look for. So we're going to go ahead, I'm going to provide you with a tool that you might choose to use that you can use to really hone in your understanding of what to look for, because when we're very precise and have a precise lens as to what to look for, we're able to collect data more purposefully and more efficiently. So here is a resource that you may want to use. I'm going to go ahead and drop this into the chat. And unlike the previous resource that I dropped into the chat, I'm just going to ask you for folks to make an individual copy of this. So I'll go ahead and navigate to it too and wait for folks to come in. Once you get in, it looks like this and it says copy me. So if you can just all make an individual copy, that would be great. The first slide is just the 3 dimensions. We're really going to look at this one right here. So just to copy, you can go File and make a copy. So I'll give folks a few moments to do that. So this is an individual workspace. So let's go ahead and use this tool to really, really refine our understanding of what exactly are we listening for in this case, in this formative assessment. So I'm just going to go ahead and model how to use this tool if you wanted to. So the look for says throughout the unit, students will employ the strategy of visualizing as they read and as they engage in firsthand science investigations. Beginning with the reading of this lesson, students will have multiple opportunities to learn about and use the strategy of visualizing to support their reading comprehension. As you circulate, make note of whether or not students are using the strategy to guide their reading. Are they discussing with their partners what they are visualizing, what they read? So for me, that's just one look for. So I would put here, look for number 1, are students visualizing as they read? that's really the only look for here. So while I provided you a slide, you'll see as you, even if you make your individual copies, I also provided a PDF of this resource here. So let's say for that on the fly assessment, you go into the breakout rooms, you need a way to collect data. You might want to use this. You might have something you're using already. This is the same as what you see on the slide, but it's a fillable PDF. So that's there for you. So as you're going into the breakout rooms, you would put all your students' names here. There's one look for, and you can just put a check, a plus, minus, delta, whatever you think, whatever the quickest way for you is to collect data. So that's just a way you can use it. You collect the data, and then so what? You see that some students, are not really creating clear pictures in their mind. What do? There are some suggestions in that text box, but they are by no means all comprehensive. You as teachers know your students best, and with your experience, you have your own teacher's toolkit that you've been developing. So go ahead, take a read, look at this suggestion, and think about, will you use this suggestion? If not, is there something else you would do to adjust instruction, let's say for those students who are not demonstrating facility with visualizing? So I'll give folks a few moments to read this and share their responses. You can, of course, come off of mute or type into the chat. So I didn't see anything in the chat. Is there anything, folks, any initial ideas? You might be still formulating your thoughts that folks would do that's different from what's here as a suggestion to adjust instruction? Well, sounds like this might be it. This particular suggestion just says that, for example, you can come back to the main room and say, I heard student X, Y, and Z use this visualization. Sometimes I think, especially for the younger ones, using a peer reference can be especially powerful, because when they hear an example of what a student discussed and said as a visualization, that can really accelerate their learning. So that's pretty much what this suggestion says. And you might have your own. If you also look at this particular resource that you made a copy of, I also included here a resource for you to further unpack a formative assessment. So let me just go ahead and show you how you could potentially use this if you wanted to. So this first part asks you, which level of the progress build are students working on during this assessment opportunity? And for this one, it's level 1. That's important to understand so you know what set of related conceptual ideas are students in the process of figuring out. And then it tells you to a section for analyzing the student data and taking action. So this one happened in lesson 4, activity 2. Here it asks you what dimensions are being figured out. The three dimensions of the new standards are here. So in this particular, the practice is that they're communicating information. Which modality are the kiddos involved in? Remember, they were discussing their visualizations. You asked them to go into breakout rooms, and you were going to visit each of the breakout rooms to hear how they're visualizing. So the modality is talking. And the listen for rather here was really to, are students able to make meaning of the scientific text using the sense-making strategy of visualization? And then the next section asks, what are you going to do to take action on the data? So what? When are you going to take action? So in this particular, you can we can say in the moment during breakout rooms, and how. Not only that, you can also keep an eye on these students and keep them in mind for future lessons when they're using the strategy of visualizing again. Because this particular strategy is utilized in a gradual release responsibility model in which first the teacher does a lot of the modeling and releases responsibility to the students as the unit progresses. So just a sample of how you could use this to really deepen your understanding and your utilization of our formative assessments. And while we won't be able to work on this now, of course, I'm happy to work on this with anyone during the open office hours and encourage you to do the same during your self-study and collaborative planning time. There is an extra copy right here, excuse me, in which you can use this to unpack the very next formative assessment in this unit. Just going to pause there to see if there's any questions that I might have missed. Of course, feel free to come off of mute at any point.
Hi, I don't have a question at the moment. I just, the chat has been disabled, so I haven't been able to write in.
Oh, okay. Thanks for letting me know. That explains everything.
Okay.
Speaking, I didn't really see the pop.
Oh, Amy.
Oh, thank you, Amy. That helps.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So folks, please feel free to come off of mute at any point. We apologize. Thank you for the understanding. All right. So before we close out, I just want to remind you that there are, besides that text box that I showed you with the look for and now what, there's other places where you can find differentiation strategies, how you can tailor instruction to meet the needs of the kids in your classroom. So there's various ways to differentiate. It could be what you teach, and how students demonstrate learning. So to keep that in mind, as you look at the differentiation brief, remember each Amplify Science unit has a differentiation brief. So let's go ahead and take a look. Let's first take a look at the differentiation brief. So if you go to the actual lesson, you'll see this differentiation brief. So this place will also give you ideas on how you can differentiate instruction in response to the data you collect. And then folks, in the actual lesson itself, if I were to go back to the lesson, not only does a differentiation brief, if I go into the lesson, each activity, folks, reminder, many of the activities, not all of them, have a teacher support tab. And this also sometimes gives you further instructional guidance. So a reminder to take a look at that. So far we've talked about specific differentiation catered to an activity or lesson, but how about overall? How does this program support diverse learner needs in general? There is a part of the curriculum that perhaps you haven't had a chance to look at. It's in the global navigation menu. If you scroll down to Science Program Guide, there's a section called Access and Equity. And in this section, it really talks about how this program supports diverse learner needs for these specific populations, girls and young women, English learners, and others. I really encourage you to take a look at this. And in the collaborative working doc that I had sent earlier, there's a place for you to really take notes on other strategies you can use to support various populations of learners, such as these. Any questions? So we did briefly take a look at what a formative assessment can look like or feel like. I just gave you a suggestion on how I would potentially do it. Of supports. I'm sure folks, as you have your wheels turning, are thinking of ways that you would conduct that particular formative assessment. Remember our formative assessment, our new, not new anymore, hybrid remote learning resources that we have can be found in the program hub rather. These are the steps. So in the at-home resources, remember these at-home resources contain asynchronous slides for students to use, but you nonetheless need ideas on when can you assess formatively. So I do want to tell you that in the teacher's overview, in each and every unit, there's a section called assessment considerations, and it tells you opportune moments to assess. So let me just go ahead and live navigate and show you. And if this program hub is new to you, again, this particular session does assume some teaching of Amplify and orientation, but if you haven't seen this so far, feel free to stick by, and I can definitely talk about this further. But remember, our hybrid and remote learning resources are here, and I'm just going to show you, for example, grade 2, this particular unit is not currently available. It's coming very soon. But if we go to the unit before, if you go to teacher overview, for each of the lessons, and these are all asynchronous lessons, at the end of each unit, folks, remember there's an assessment considerations section at the end of each chapter, and it tells you places where you can possibly formatively assess. Okay, and it tells you to go back to the original teacher's guide to gain that extra resource and information on that. So before we close out, I just want to see if there's any other questions. I usually do a quick formative assessment on how folks feel they've made progress towards our goals, but I do know that our chat is disabled, but here, just revisiting our objectives for today. Okay, we aim to really understand the learning goals, understand how to apply the formative resources, and begin to look at different ways we can cull differentiation strategies from our program. So I hope we met those goals today, and I do want to remind you of the NYC resources site. Don't forget that today's PD session materials will be posted there, and there is other useful information for NYC DOE educators like yourself. The program hub not only has remote learning resources, it also has videos. If you need a refresher, if you're new to the program, have a colleague who's completely new. There are orientation videos here that we encourage you to look at, and there's also videos that further deepen your understanding of the program. So keep checking back for updates. And of course, we have our program guide and our Amplify Science help there, as well as this email 1-800 number in the chat for not only pedagogical questions, not only non-pedagogical questions, but pedagogical questions as well. So this ends the content for today's session. Again, we do have